We will be recording this, and then if you have neighbors or anyone who wasn't able to be here wanted to join in, they could do that um, using the recording. I think I see Council Member Ewing on the call. Appreciate you being here, Ms. Ewing. Is there anything you would like to start us out with? Be glad to give you the floor here.
No, I'm just grateful that we're having this meeting. I've heard from a couple of residents who could not make the meeting, but they're very supportive of the project and excited that it is moving forward. So I look forward to the presentation.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being here, and for all of you again, thanks for your time. We'll try to be respectful of that and go through this fairly efficiently. We're going to cover three main topics tonight. One is a little bit of a overview of the program and how Chalmers, and I think I'm saying that right? Is it Chalmers? Okay. How this street got into the program. Secondly, we'll take a look at the specific concept that we are thinking right now would make for a good traffic calming project on this street. And then the last thing before we go, we'll leave you with some next steps, what you can expect from us and our team as we move this project forward. With that, a little bit about the traffic calming program. This is a residential street program as opposed to streets that might go through business areas or industrial areas, things like that. We are really focused on trying to enhance the quality of life when speeds have come in and sometimes really devolve that and make it difficult to walk or bicycle or even just like check the mail. It can really have a negative impact on your quality of life in these neighborhoods. And so we really focus on the residential aspect to that. We do encourage speed reduction. That's obvious, but it also is as opposed to trying to do any kind of volume reduction. We don't try to move traffic, push it to another street. That's not fair for other folks. We try to design these projects to keep traffic where it is, but just operate more responsibly at a slower speed. And then the last thing is we do focus really on physical solutions, meaning some of the types of tools we're going to show you here tonight, we have had the best success with. We can do things like signage and try to do some educational components. Those have their place and can be effective, but really what we focus on is trying to bring changes into the right of way that are going to force drivers to slow down. And we've had pretty good success, we think, at doing that.
So Jeff, just one quick question.
Sure.
Um, as you're showing us the different ways to implement traffic calming, um, by doing that, are you trying to say that we haven't yet determined what mixture of things we're going to employ on this particular street?
I would say that's true. We haven't determined that, although I'm going to show you a concept for what we think would be a good project, and I want to get
Okay,
y'all's reaction to that.
thank you.
If you say no, let's go back to the drawing board. We'd like to see some other things. That's totally what this meeting is about, and so we're happy to hear that. On the other hand, if we're pretty close and you guys are just ready to move this forward, we can do it that way too. We'll talk about that as we get into it. But yeah, I don't want you to think it's all solved and I'm just here presenting the finished project. We're ways from that. So a couple of the aspects to traffic calming. We focus on the engineering side, making those changes into the right of way. That's what the DOT is really all about. We've got great partners in the enforcement arena with Metro PD. They know we're out here. They appreciate what we're doing for our part of trying to increase safe streets. They do a very important job too, but often the important work that Metro PD is doing, they just don't have a lot of resources left for strictly for traffic enforcement, and so we don't rely on them, but we do work in partnership with them. And then lastly, there is an educational component to it. I will show you some tools that we have, but those are doing they do some other activities too. They put out some public service announcements that you may have seen and those kind of things too that work on the education side to try and reinforce this message of traffic safety. A piece of that type of information is here that Metro likes to show. It's one of the reasons we do traffic calming in neighborhoods and why it's so popular is that there are a lot of different types of users on our streets. And so pedestrians in particular are highly vulnerable when they're out walking in the devastating event that occurs if there is a pedestrian versus vehicle crash. We know that the chance of survival goes way up if the traffic is operating at a slower speed. And so that, among other reasons, is why we do this. And we've had pretty good success in neighborhoods. And it shows in the popularity of the program. We do typically have done 2 um, application windows per year in which Metro has been funded to take on about 50 projects per year, 25 in each of the application windows. Every time those windows open, it seems like our backlog, our requests just get bigger and bigger. We're now over 500 applications for streets just like Chalmers, where people are having the same issues you are, and they've applied into the program. We just can't get to that many. So last summer, council, which has been very supportive of this program and just being here at these meetings and supporting them, but also supporting them with funding, had some excess funds, and so NDOT was able to do an additional round of neighborhood streets, and so that's one reason we're here tonight. So there was the biggest ever announcement of traffic calming last summer of 85 new neighborhoods, but continues to be very popular. We always like to plug Hub Nashville on these meetings too, because sometimes we get into a meeting and people, want to ask about, well, can we get crosswalks, or can we get new stop signs, or can we get sidewalks, and just any number of things that all great projects that things that NDOT does, but not part of this program. Those types of requests are certainly welcome and should have their start at Hub Nashville. That's hub.Nashville.gov. Or you can call 311 and talk to an operator and give them those requests. And that's not just NDOT. I think just about every Metro department has a presence there, and it's a great clearinghouse for any service of Metro government. If you're not familiar with that, it's a great tool. As I mentioned, this is it's kind of a competitive program. I mentioned it's highly popular, but the way we get from 500 applications down to where your street has been selected as one of those is through a prioritization process. When those applications come in, the first thing that we do is a great big data collection effort where we go out and put tubes on the roads and actually collect speeds and collect traffic volumes. And 70% of the score comes from those 2 metrics. We know how fast traffic is moving. We know how much of it there is. And then the other 30% comes from some of those non-auto considerations that we were talking about. So for instance, if the street has sidewalks, it actually scores lower. The thought there being they have somewhat of a safe place to walk. That doesn't mean the speeding is wonderful, but at least a pedestrian can walk down the street and not feel in jeopardy of their life. In streets like yours, you don't have sidewalks, so your score would have gone up because of that. We also look at are there places that pedestrians may want to walk? Are there schools nearby, or transit services, or parks, those types of things? And then lastly, do we have a documented instance of a pedestrian crash on the street? So we measure all that data, roll that up, and prioritize those and select those projects accordingly. And fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, your street is in the top group of those, and so it was selected for traffic calming project. So some of that data specific to your street, and by the way, we are going from Harding Place at the north end down to Hildreth. I believe that's maybe it's not an always stop, but the stop sign there at Chalmers and Hildreth. The speed there, the 85th percentile speed, is just sort of a statistical way we look at that. 37 miles per hour. It's posted at 25. That's about mid-range for streets that we're doing traffic calming on. Obviously, it's higher than normal for most of Metro streets. The traffic volume here, just a little over 600 cars a day. That's actually on the lower end of streets that we typically work on. It sounds like a lot of cars. It is, but for what we do, that's kind of on the low side. And then the street width, which becomes important to us as we start trying to think about a design for a project here, about 22 feet wide. It might vary a little bit. It'll be within a foot or two of that, but 22 feet. And again, that's pretty typical for a metro street. Should present any unique difficulty in design of one of these projects. And then the length is right at half a mile long from one end to the other. I'll show you a picture of that here, just a map, so you can see the limits. So Chalmers is this green line right toward the center and bottom of this map. And this map is a selection from the larger Davidson County-wide interactive traffic calming map that's available on Metro's website. They do make that available. It's a nice resource if you want to get on there and look around your neighborhood. And you might want to do that if you have some concerns about a particular street, because what this map shows you in these colors is streets that are already in the program. That's the green ones. That's why Chalmers is green there. It's in the program, but it's just in process. It has not been completed yet. But you may want to find out if there's a street that you have some concerns. You wonder if an application has been put in on that street. Those are the purple ones. And so you can see there that we have a number of applications that just have not been selected yet in this area. And then the blue ones are streets that have already had some form of traffic calming applied. If it's solid, that's typically more of that educational component. You probably won't find speed cushions or anything like that on there, but if it is dashed, you will. And that can be helpful if you've never experienced these, never driven across them. A lot of people in Nashville have by this point, but if you haven't, this map makes that available to you, so you can find out where could I go and drive over these and experience what it is we're talking about. So you've got a couple of projects that were very recently installed there at Overhill and Castleman, so those are just north of you, not too far away. So let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that we have available to us in the program. And then this will kind of set your understanding as we start to look at the concept for the street. Speed cushions are really the bread and butter of this program. We use these as really the mainstay of traffic calming for probably north of 95% of the projects that we do. It's speed cushions. Some people just think of us as the speed cushion program. That's okay. That's a lot of what we do, and you're going to see that on your project. We're proposing speed cushions here as well. They can be configured a couple of different ways. You see a set of 2 there. You see sets of 3 there. We can go wider. The main idea between 2 versus 3 is just to make sure we've got the road width covered. If we leave too big of a gap on either the edges or in between them, we know what people will do. They will drive around them, or they'll try to drive around them even if they can't. Even if that means leaving the road and driving off road to get around them, we know they will do that. And so we take pains to make sure our design prevents that to as great an extent as possible. Sometimes we do that with signage. The steel sign is a pretty good deterrent to doing that, and that's a typical sign assembly that we use. It goes along with the speed cushions, and sometimes we do that with something a little softer, like the delineators that you see there. I don't think we will have a need for, I don't think that'll be a big part of the consideration here. At 22 feet wide, that street is narrow enough that a set of 2 speed cushions ought to be just fine. Unless you got real flat yards or something, and we'll be looking at that just to make sure it doesn't look like someone's going to drive around. And that's more common in some streets than it is others. I don't expect we would have much of an issue here. These speed cushions are about 3 feet tall, or 3 feet, 3 inches, 3 inches tall or 3 inches thick. That's all it takes to really bring about slower speeds if someone tries to drive across these. And then they're all 6 feet wide. So nobody in here drives a car that has a wheelbase 6 feet wide. So you can't straddle these. It may look like you can, but you cannot. You will have to put at least 2 tires on the speed cushion. There are some, the reason why they come in those little pads like you see and not one continuous speed hump is there are some vehicles that do have a wider wheelbase that we're sensitive to, and those would be our ambulances, fire trucks, and that type of thing. And so those wider wheelbase vehicles, they will still encounter these, but the edges are sloped so that the impact to those vehicles is not as great. So they can maybe not quite maintain their speed, but they can still get to where they need to in a hurry, even over these. And we work with the fire department and EMS. They know what we're up to. They know the streets we're working on, and they're supporters of the program. The other design consideration that we have in our tool bag is we can vary the length of these. So the very shortest ones, this would be in the direction as you drive across them, would be 7 feet. The longest would be 14, and then our typical use though is right there in the middle at a 10.5-foot cushion. The shorter the speed cushion, the more aggressive it is, and so you have to drive slower over the 7-foot than you do over the 14-foot. We reserve those 7-footers for our densest neighborhoods, downtown, Germantown, Edge Hill, East Nashville, those kinds of places where setbacks are low, there's on-street parking, there's a lot of people walking, it just calls for a slower street, probably than a more suburban environment like we have here on Chalmers. And then we even have rural areas, still in Davidson County. There are some left that we really opt for a 14-foot in some of those areas. So that's the rundown about the speed cushions. Again, most of y'all have encountered these and are familiar with them. Speed tables are really a close cousin to the cushions. They're made by the same vendor. They work pretty much the same material. They just have a little bit different configuration in that they are one big wide ramp up and back down. We will use these in some very special settings, but for the most part, because of the experience that we have with emergency vehicles, we really like to stay with the speed cushions unless there's just something very unusual about the street. So we have used these before, but no, we don't use them very often. We do have some before and after data. I think most people's experience shows that we can, once you drive over them, you understand why most traffic slows down. But we do have some data that supports that we find that we're somewhere in the range of probably 7 to 12 miles an hour reduction. It really depends on how fast traffic was moving before and the configuration that's used and just the street itself. It can vary, but we're having really good results in terms of the average speeds that are seen after the implementation of a traffic calming project. Excuse me. Another tool that we have that kind of lends itself more in the educational category are radar feedback signs. Again, these are things that you've probably seen around town more as well. Jury's still out a little bit in terms of the long-term effectiveness on these. Some of that data is still being collected. We believe they have a really good track record, at least in the short term, as people see this thing, and of course it gives you feedback, real-time feedback on what your speed is, as well as giving that posted speed limit. So it's just a good reminder to folks that watch your speed and proceed appropriately. We typically use these in our projects mostly when we can't get something more physical in the street. So if there's a condition that won't let us use a speed cushion, we may supplement the others that we do have on the street with something like a feedback sign. Those conditions would be like if we have a steep hill, we don't put cushions on those. If we have real sharp curves where you don't have good sight distance, you can't be aware that it's coming up, or if we just have a lot of driveways. I don't think Chalmers meets any of those conditions. I think you're pretty flat, you're pretty straight, and you got a lot of frontage there in your lots. You don't have any constraints in terms of driveways or other things to avoid. So we have not proposed any feedback signs on this street. We also use these, by the way, too, when traffic volumes are high enough that we won't put something raised. We're not going to put a speed cushion on Hillsborough Road, for instance, but we might do something like this if speed was just really out of the ordinary there. Occasionally, we will do marking, pavement markings, if we feel like the perception of the width of the road is really leading to higher speeds. We don't do this a whole lot. We particularly don't do like the picture on the right very often. In some cases, that might be helpful to kind of delineate lanes and maybe give the appearance of narrower lanes. But often, what that double solid yellow line tells people is, hey, this is a more major street and it's built to drive faster on. So we're very careful about how we use pavement markings. They can kind of be perceived different ways by different folks. And so, but it is a tool that we use from time to time. Bulb outs and chicanes are really more urban treatments, but bulb outs kind of narrow the road. Some of our streets in Nashville were just built exceptionally wide. I don't think yours is that case, but even in urban areas, we find maybe they were old streetcar streets or something. We've got some of those that they were just built differently, built very wide, and that can lend itself to higher speeds. And so using paint and some other tools we can effectively narrow that road and bring about slower speeds at intersections that way. And then chicanes are something we have on very few metro streets. One or two come to mind, but it's just a concept where traffic kind of meanders back and forth across the road. You almost have to have something like on-street parking to make this work very well. It kind of replicates those yield streets that you have in very dense urban areas, where it's almost too narrow for two cars. You kind of have to wait your turn and work your way down them. So that, again, it's specialized use for very urban environments. And then traffic circles is one that we kind of keep in the tool bag, although we just have not implemented very many of these lately. There are a few close to you. There are some up and down the kind of that Ashwood area over near Belmont. Some, but for the most part, we've been hesitant to use them, largely because of some of the feedback we got from school buses and some of those special vehicles that just have a harder time navigating them. So they have their place, and you might see them in other cities more, but we've just not adopted them very frequently. So specific to this street, after all of that, it probably looks boring, but we've got a series of speed cushions that we think would make the most effective treatment on the street. So Chalmers, as I mentioned, is right at a half-mile long. Hildreth is the little stop sign here on the left-hand side of your screen. And then, of course, the purple line is the street, and it goes to the stop sign on the right-hand side of your screen, which is Harding Place. As I mentioned, it's pretty straight and it's pretty flat, and so really the only design constraint that we have is kind of looking at the spacing of how many sets of speed cushions do we think are needed and are appropriate. And the way we do that is we look at the length of the street. If there had been other stop signs along through here, we would take that in consideration, but there are not. And so as that unbroken length of a half mile, we break that into, we're usually looking something on the order of 400 to 500 feet. We might go a little north of 600 feet occasionally, or a little less than 400 sometimes, but we have found that if we can keep it in that 400 to 500 foot range, we get a nice smooth progression of slow streets. That's close enough so that someone doesn't, clear one set of these things and then take off and hit the gas just to get to the next one to slow down again. If you leave too much room in between them, that will happen. But it's also not so close that we hope it's obnoxious and push traffic to another street. We try to keep it so that, if you're going to divert, it better be very convenient for you, because we don't want to push traffic to Terra or some other street that might get you in the same place. And so we work to kind of walk that line, keep that balance. And we've had really good experience in that 500 foot range. So the average spacing here is about 515. I've cheated these a little bit towards the ends so that, as traffic turns off of Harding Place, they're going to encounter a cushion just a little bit quicker than that. Then they'll be a little more spread out. So we think that'll give a good result here along the length of Chalmers. But anyway, that's about as basic as a traffic calming concept gets. I want to hear your feedback to that. Anything I've said to this point, I want to stop for a minute. You should be able to come off mute and talk to us, or I'll turn my chat on if you would rather type something. Feel free. But any comments or questions you have at this point?
Hi, this is Chris Cook. Can you guys hear me?
We can. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I can just speak for myself, but the most you can put on here with the the widest and the shortest speed cushions is great for me. I'm the one that put in the application for it, and I have young kids, and we did have a car that went through our front fence into our front yard before,
Oh my gosh.
which kind of prompted all this. So people go very, very fast, especially down here because it's flat. And then we also run into the problem of, as you're aware, a lot of pedestrians take the street because it's flat. So they like to use the street for walking. And then ever since Terra put their speed, they have speed humps, which are enormous. So ever since they put their speed humps, everybody comes down Hildreth, and then comes down Chalmers, and they used to go Terra. And I actually know people that live on Terra that will drive down Hildreth, come to Chalmers, and go over because they don't want to go over their own speed humps.
That's ironic.
I would say yes. So for me, at least, and I'm just speaking for myself and some of the neighbors that I've talked to, the shorter would be better for us. The 7 foot. I had a question about the width of cars because we do have some Hummers in the neighborhood. I was just curious about the width of the Hummers over those because sometimes they drive a little quickly.
Yeah.
And do you know how long Overhill's speed cushions are? Because I have been on those before and they seem efficient, I guess I would say.
Yeah. I can check and make sure, but I believe those are the 10 foot. We've gone to using those more than anything, so I'm guessing it's that, but I could double check and make sure. As far as the width,
and your experience,
I'll say what I know about that real quick. I don't know the wheelbase of a Hummer. I know they're wide.
neither do I.
Yeah, they will fall into that category, more towards, like, I'm not saying they're as wide as an ambulance, they're probably not, but even I just drive like a full-size Silverado, and the wider the wheelbase, the bigger the vehicle, the less impact there will be, and so I still have to slow down. I'm not saying I just cruise over them. I still hit them square on, but and I would think a Hummer would be similar. It will still be impacted, but it may not be as much as if you're in a much smaller car.
Yeah, I think that for us, at least when we walk and my kids walk, just trying to make sure that people aren't going wide to avoid these. Right. You say that the 2 cushions should probably be good enough. I'm just doing the math, 22 feet wide. I'd hate for people, instead of having 2 instead of 3, being like, well, I can go wide and avoid half of this. And then you're going directly into where the pedestrians usually walk. So I just want to make sure that 2 is better than 3 for the width. So people aren't, like you said, purposely trying to get, well, I can get half my tires on this, but not the other half, so I can go a little bit faster. It's been pretty bad. People cut through Granny White, they go Granny White, they go Tyne, and they go Tyne to Hildreth to Chalmers to Harding to avoid, that Lipscomb area, Benton Hill, where there's just a lot of tie up. And I've had people try to pass me both on Hildreth and Chalmers in a residential in the morning when there's a lot of walkers. So it's kind of gotten out of control, and, I'm going the speed limit, which we don't have a lot of speed limit signs around, I would say. So I don't think people actually realize it's 25. There's just a couple. I do know that the Burton Valley Road, there is a stop sign. It's only a one-way stop. Burton Valley coming onto Chalmers, that stop sign's almost fallen over. So I did have a request from one neighbor. Well, ask them if they can just straighten that stop sign so people can see it. But I can probably use the hub for that as well.
Yeah, that's a great use of hub. Yeah.
Yeah, and once you have the hub request in there, if you can just send me um, the details of where exactly the stop sign is, then I can sort of reinforce your request by getting in touch with our NDOT liaison.
Okay.
And that also supports the fact that I was very happy to see that one of the bumps will be directly off of Harding, because I live near that stop sign that Chris is talking about, right at Burton Valley coming off of Harding. And if there wasn't a bump before there, I think people would still speed up to that stop sign and turn left and go down Burton Valley. So
Yeah,
I'm
very much.
glad to see that there's one there to slow them down coming off of Harding. And I'm trying to remember, I've gone across the ones on Terra quite often, and they seem to be very effective, but I think they're solid all the way across. I don't think they're in pieces, but I know that's Forest Hills. That's not Nashville. So, but Chris, do you know, are those are solid, aren't they? Straight across, all
Yeah,
one
they're
piece?
solid. They're solid. Yeah, they're solid, and they call them humps for a reason because they are
Yeah,
tall, and I mean,
Yeah.
you
yeah,
can just see the scratches of the cars that come over them. But like
yeah.
I said, once they put, because Angie used to be our councilwoman,
Yes, I know.
and I think she tried to convince them to not put them on Terra because she knew what was going to happen to us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But here we are. So.
Which
Yeah.
makes me glad that
And,
we're getting to your road now. Because she was right.
yeah, is there ever any conversation about stop signs like Burton Valley and Chalmers being a three-way stop, or Hildreth and Chalmers being a four-way stop? Is that anything that you talk about,
Right.
Jeff, or is that somebody else?
Oh, yeah, we hear it all the time. I mean, certainly not specific to this street yet, but it is very typical that it comes up in the course of these meetings. And, we can relay that. And again, that's another request that you can make in Hub. What we think happens though is that goes into kind of a different area in traffic engineering, and those folks that look over and they say, oh, wait a minute, we've got a traffic calming project on that street, they'll handle it. And so we're kind of in this vicious cycle of who's doing what. So we want to investigate that. There's a little study that has to come with that. Always stops and new stop signs are actually approved by a board called the Traffic and Parking Commission. They meet monthly. It's a regular
Aha.
metro board,
Okay.
but the request starts with NDOT and their engineers because they have to put it on the agenda and then give a recommendation to that board. So it really does start with NDOT, but make that request in Hub, but I can also relay that back to our project manager so they don't just automatically kick it out because there's a traffic calming project. One thing that we don't ever want to do in traffic calming is preclude other good ideas or other things that should be happening. Like I don't think sidewalks are anywhere on your guys' list, but just to use that as or in your future, but use that as an example. We don't want a traffic calming project to preclude you getting something bigger or something that might be more effective. That's the nice thing about what we do here is, when it's time to pave or it's time to do something different on the street or whatever, our stuff is pretty low cost. It's modular. It can be taken away without much difficulty. So all that to say, if a new always stop or a new stop sign were to be applied, we can shift, we can adjust. It doesn't really impact that type of request.
So, Jeff, one thing that you had said in your presentation was that one of the determinants of whether to use 2 speed cushions or 3 across a road um, is looking at the areas to the left and right of the road and seeing if there is the ability for a car to skirt the 2 speed humps by sort of going a little bit off road.
Mm-hmm.
What you had said, Chalmers is a pretty flat road. So, in the
Yeah,
case of this project, do you think 3 might be a better choice?
I wouldn't. we typically wouldn't on a 22-foot wide road. We'll typically go even up to 24 feet. We usually just do 2, not always. That's where we'll really look at the edge.
Okay.
It may be flat, but what's really important on the flatness part when we're looking at, somebody trying to drive around is, what's that edge condition like? Are there ditches? Are there
Mm-hmm.
trees? And it looks like there may be some trees along there, others not so much. But if it looks like it's, some metro streets have that little 2 foot of gravel, you can still see, and it kind of adds to the width. We pay attention to all of that when we're doing the design. And if it looks like, we only leave about at most 4, usually more like 3 feet on the outside edge. So you don't
Okay.
have a lot of room to the edge of the pavement.
And would
uh,
that sign, see in that picture at the top right of your, oh, where'd
yeah,
it go?
that one.
Right there in the top
That one,
left,
yeah.
there's a speed cushion 20 miles per hour
Yep.
sign. Will we get those as well?
Uh,
Because that
you-
would also certainly deter people trying to skirt around it.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes we strategically place those, like in this instance. Often they're a little bit before, but sometimes we'll
Yep.
say, hey, we got kind of an edge condition here. Let's put the sign right at them so that
Okay.
it's just
Okay.
further deterrent that somebody's not going to drive through one of those big steel assemblies just to get around it. So, yeah, we do pay attention. Same thing with these little plastic delineators. Sometimes, if you got, in this case, you have, I don't know if that's a bike lane or just a shoulder or something, but you do have to pay attention to that and make sure it's not usable for some knucklehead to try and leave the street to drive around it.
I'm assuming you've already done the analysis for Chalmers and you're recommending or proposing the 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, what we have done to this point has all been desktop. So, we're looking at aerials. We can measure it desktop. We'll do street view and just kind of get the lay of the land, literally lay of the land. And so we feel confident that, we can get all 4 locations here. They may shift just a little bit based on what you're seeing here, based on driveways and things. But yeah, we think we can get all that, and we think 2 is the right solution for that, and we shouldn't have any problem with someone driving around. But the second step is when we get into the design, actually getting out on the street just to field verify all of that, make sure.
Hey, Jeff, at that point, if any of the neighbors on that street would like to meet with you and your team and just chat about, thoughts that they might have on the design, is that a possibility?
It is. It
Okay.
is. It is. Yeah, we've done that once or twice
Okay.
with neighborhood groups. I'd be glad to coordinate that.
Okay, great. That would be great.
Yeah, I think we're all leaning towards, at least Bob and I that live on the street, that I'll go back to my biggest fear is that the 2 is going to lead to more people going towards where all the people walk. So, just a note on there to take a look at that again, I think would be great for us because we have a lot of morning rush hour walkers.
Mhm.
And I have an email from some of them that said, hey, you can read this email if you want to, but multiple of us have almost been helped multiple times on this street where we've been walking with people going too fast or on their phone or both. So I
Yeah.
just don't want to get a situation where the speed cushions make it more detrimental for people walking because now people are driving peripherally instead of in the center. So
I may just now be catching up with you, Chris. I think typically if you're passing somebody and they're walking on the side of the road, you're going to veer over at least to the middle, maybe into the oncoming lane to go around them, right? But now if we have you happen to pass somebody right at the location of one of these speed cushions, you can still go to the middle of the road, but you're going to be hitting the highest part of the speed cushion. You can still do it. It's okay. But you're saying they may hold their lane in order to straddle the speed cushion and stay close to the pedestrian. I think I'm with you.
I say that they'll actually swerve to the outside of the lane, which would be closer to where people are walking to get, because I'm looking at this picture you have right here, to get their right 2 wheels off the speed cushion.
Right.
So I was a kid once. So when I would go over these, I would just put 2 wheels on, 2 wheels off, and I could go faster than having 4 wheels on because you wouldn't get the bump. You'd get a sideways lean. So
Well, maybe it depends on the car. but I think most of us who do these in this program have found the quickest way to drive them, if you want to drive them fast, is you straddle them. You try to get your wheels as close to the two outside edges of that thing. So and that's why we place them this way in the lane, so that hopefully
Okay.
most drivers will stay right in their lane. But what you're saying is a good point, because now I might have gone around, or at least gotten in the middle of the road to go around a pedestrian, whereas now I may just literally hold my lane, and that puts me closer. I don't think we'll see a lot of people actually getting two wheels closer to the white line. That's really a bad way to drive these.
I guess my worry, to sort of add on to what Chris just said, is that um, we've seen an increase in drivers engaging in really just plain stupid behavior, not paying attention to pedestrians, not paying attention to cyclists. We've had too many pedestrian and cyclist injuries and deaths, and so yeah, it would be great to really look closely at that and make sure that whatever we put in place, since we have this project finally happening, that whatever we put in place is going to be giving maximum protection to our pedestrians.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I am amazed at the number of people that try to pass me and or ride 6 inches behind me, just laying on their horn the entire time when I'm going the speed limit. And I've
Yeah.
even had situations where I'll be going to the gym on Chalmers, so I'll come back from my house. I'll go left on Chalmers. I'll be taking a left on Harding. Where people, while I'm waiting to turn left on Harding, they will sweep around me on the right side and turn left in front of me because I'm
Oh my
apparently taking
God.
too long waiting for traffic. It's gotten extremely aggressive over here.
Yeah.
This stop sign at Burton Valley, nobody stops at this anymore. The Burton Valley, they just kind of, if they're turning right, they just keep going. And that's to be expected. Some of the speeds to be expected, but I mean, lately I'm like, dear Lord, I'm just trying to drive to my house here. I don't know why you're trying to pass me. This is a residential, and it's happened. I can't even tell you, a good 5 times. And again, people passing me
Yeah.
at the stop sign. And I'm not, an overly
I
cautious
usually,
driver.
yeah,
I'm
I
just waiting
usually
for traffic.
I usually fear for my life when I'm turning left off of Harding into Chalmers, because so many people use that left turn lane as a passing lane and
Oh my
don't
God.
even think about people turning in that lane. So I figure if I ever do die from a car accident, I'm probably be sitting right at that intersection and somebody's going to hit me head on.
Obviously, I sincerely hope that does not happen, Bob.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, hey, thanks guys. And my name is Kiki Morton. I live on the other end of Chalmers, but I can just second everything that Chris and is it Bob have said. I agree that we do have an increase in speeders since the speed humps went in on Terra, and it has gotten a bit out of hand. So we really appreciate you looking into this.
Well,
Well, it
absolutely.
seems there's definitely consensus. Doesn't look like anyone's going to turn speed humps down.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly seems like we're on the right track here. So let me move on into kind of our next steps, and then we'll come back for how y'all want to handle kind of wrapping up that design and moving this forward. So we're here at this red circle, the neighborhood meeting. You've already gone through the application and the prioritization. What we'll do after tonight, excuse me, is move into the design phase, where we'll actually, do a little more detail. If you've been on that Metro website, or if you haven't, you can go on there and you can see other examples of traffic calming design plans to see how much detail you get. You'll be able to tell, if you want to, exactly where we're going to install these. And so we enter that phase of the project next. And if you want to coordinate a site visit, I'm more than happy to meet you out there. Once we get that design done, we kind of have an option, and we really have the option tonight. You can tell me what you want to do if you're prepared to do that. we can either come back to a second neighborhood meeting. We used to do this on every project, but we found more times than not, way more times than not, everybody said, you know, this is basically what you told us at the first meeting. It hasn't changed, and we're just having a second meeting here, and with not a lot of new information. So if you feel like what you're seeing is pretty representative of what you had expected, and want to just move this forward as efficiently as we can, we have made this meeting, you know, optional, and we can move straight into, after we get the design done, we'll post that on the website and then move straight into the balloting process. And then that's a 6-week process, and then we go from that, if it's successful, into construction. So
Jeff, what happens if the neighbors opted to just go straight from the design phase to the online ballot, and we did not get a majority? Then what happens? Like say the design was for 2 cushions, you know, at each location, at each of the 4 areas. But the neighbors were like, you know, we really, really feel so strongly about 3, and we'd like to have the option to discuss that or appeal it or whatever. How does that work?
Yeah, I would rather take the time on the front end with the design to make sure it's something that the neighborhood supports.
Okay,
And
perfect.
that we can kind of come to a consensus before we put it out to everybody else.
Yeah,
you know,
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Then I would actually, you know, for the 3 neighbors that are on this call, I would put it to you guys to decide whether you think a second neighborhood meeting would be needed, or if you just want to have a pretty thorough design phase where you could meet the team out on your street and have a chance to discuss things with them, with the, you know, things specifically in front of you, and then go straight to the online ballot.
I don't think we need a second meeting.
I would
Yes,
second
I agree
that.
with Kiki.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be
And-
the same 3 people that maybe get on that meeting.
Yeah.
Probably.
You sound like you've done this
I did.
before. I mean,
I would
that's
say,
exactly what.
Bob, I did have a handful of people that were going to come, but there was one neighbor was having a Christmas concert tonight, so they told me these are the people that probably
That's
can't
important.
come that do
That's
support it.
understandable. And you
My
3
big
are good
question actually
representatives.
was, my big question is who gets to vote, and the reason I asked that, because I kind of popped on this meeting to wait for somebody from Terra to say, no, don't you dare, because they cut down and used it. So I guess my question is, who actually gets to vote on this? Is it only the people that live only on Chalmers Drive? Is it only to a certain, you know, is it till Hildreth? Is it entire Chalmers Drive? Does it include Hildreth, Benton Valley? Do you know who gets a say in it?
I do, and I'll show you that. So a little bit about the balloting process.
There we go.
So the people that get to vote, and I'll cover that in just a second, will get a card. Hopefully you all got a card, or some of you got a card at least, about tonight's meeting, but we'll do a very similar kind of card to the eligible voters, and except this one will have a little different information. It's got a QR code that takes you to a Nashville.gov website where you put in your name and address, and there's a little ID code we do down here just to make sure the people we intend to vote are the people that are voting. And you get that card in your mail, and you log on and you vote. You can also call if you got neighbors that, you know, not so sure about all of this and just would rather talk to somebody. There's a number on there they can call and vote that way. We hold that open for 6 weeks. And then at the end of that 6 weeks, it closes, and we look at the yes and no's, and if we need 2/3 who have voted in favor of it. That's 2/3 of the people who vote, not of everybody on the street. And so that's how that goes. And then we move forward if that passes. That sounds like a high bar. That's kind of intentional, but again, you can go on the website and they actually publish the results, and you'll see overwhelmingly when these get in, and we get the kind of feedback like we're getting tonight, overwhelmingly they're passing. And some of them are passing with 100% in favor. So the people that get to vote are shown here. The policy is that you only the voters are the property owners. First of all, they have to own the property. We send the cards to the owner. If that's in California, they go to California, and so we're polling the owner of the property that is immediately adjacent to the right of way of the street. So we're only looking at the segment between Harding Place and Hildreth. So nobody on the other side of Hildreth will get a ballot to vote, and nobody down the side streets except for the people that are on the corners. But your property line has to be adjacent to the right of way of the subject street. So you see those people here. And that's who's been invited by postcard to these meetings. We're happy that it's in newsletters. As many people that can come to these, we're fine with. We like the information out there. But when it comes time for voting, that will just be those people that you see there. If there's any of these properties that are vacant, I don't think there are, but if there are, we don't ballot those, and then there's no businesses or anything like that to worry about here. So. If someone does own more than one property on the street, they just get polled one time. I don't know if that's the case.
How about builder-owned empty houses? Because we got 2 of those.
Right.
Do the builders get to vote then?
If we know they're empty, no, because we're working with residents that live there. If we don't know and it's just a business name, but it's a residential street, and the planning department thinks it's a residential house, as evidenced by their online mapping, we'll probably send it to them. We don't know it. We don't go up and down and try to guess what house vacant and what house not. So yeah, we would probably send it. My guess is they probably won't vote, but I don't know. But if it's a builder that owns multiple lots or multiple lots, then they would just get one time. I don't know if any of these are they doing any HPRs, those kind of horizontal properties where they split and do? I don't think y'all have any of those.
No, we're not. No, we have an ordinance, but that's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. Does that answer the question about who gets to vote?
Yes, absolutely.
So the biggest question I have is, when you start doing the field assessment, if you could, like, how will you get information to the neighbors about when that will be, so that they can have the opportunity to get out there and talk to you and your team?
Yeah.
I mean, would it be through me? I'm happy to be the conduit if you need.
Yeah, it's not like you don't have anything else to do, Councilman. So Chris, I'll be glad to kind of coordinate it directly through you. If y'all want to make it like a big block party and have all comers out there, I'm fine with it. But you may just want to meet with a group. However y'all want to do it, it's kind of up to you. I'll just make myself available to kind of meet on your schedule, and we can do that. I mean, typically it's during the day. If we wait till typical meeting hours, it's dark at this point. So I don't know how much of that we want to do, but I'll be glad to meet. I'm game whenever, but we might want to do it in the daytime if that's possible.
Sure, whatever is easiest for you. Bob and I live right next to each other, and we both work from home, so we're around.
That's handy.
And I work from home too, so I'd be happy to come out at any point.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Chris, do you want me to just get with you when it looks like my schedule's going to be where I'll be out there and try to give you some advance notice? If y'all can't do it, I can reschedule on my end. We'll just kind of work it that way.
No, that's fine. And then I can, Kiki, I'll just stop by sometime and give you my contact information.
Okay, that's great.
Keep you in the loop.
If you don't mind, can you put your email? Well, let's see. Why don't you just email me at that address right there?
I've got a chat here. Does this work?
You're welcome to put
this.
Yeah, I was going to say Yep, that works for me. I'll get that from the recording. That is my
Kiki,
email
are you
address.
on here? Are you?
Yes. Do you want me
there's yours. Okay.
Yeah, and again, once we get that design and get those plans done, those would be posted on the website, and so you'll be able to see all the details there. But that's our contact information. I'm Jeff, the one in green at the bottom. Feel free to email me also if you want to include Metro, the actual Metro folks who are involved in the program. There are several of them, so it's a generic email address, but they do check that. So feel free to email one or both of those.
Just in case, if y'all need me for anything, I'm just sandy.ewing@Nashville.gov.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We appreciate everyone's time. Appreciate very thoughtful comments. Sorry you're having the experience you're having, but glad you got introduced into the program. Look forward to working with you on a project. Any final questions or comments? Council members, always appreciate you being here and taking your time to join us. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Kiki, did I cut you off?
No, I was just going to say thank you to both you and Sandy. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
thanks to the three of you for coming, and thanks, Jeff, for that really great presentation. And I'm excited that this is going to move forward and we'll get it done.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.